Hey, let's take a little journey through the restoration of a vintage Archtop guitar that I bought 4 years ago or so. And it is a bit of a journey because, like I said, I've had it for 4 years and I still don't know what it is or who made it. And every time I think I figure out what it is or who made it, something comes up that makes me second guess that. So I bought this thing on an online auction site, not the big one. For less than $100, and it was just going off photographs. It looked like it was the original bridge and the original tailpiece, and I thought it was a Framus. And I could see in the tail of it that there were a couple screws shoved into the thing, so it looked like the heel had been broken. There were some cracks and stuff, and it was screwed together, so it looked like the neck was going to have to come off and be repaired to get it back in playing. But other than that, it looked like it was pretty much intact and solid, so I took a gamble on it and I got it. And let's jump in. I love Archtop guitars, and this one I thought was really particularly beautiful, and that weird third sound hole really interested me. And so when I saw that I could get it for less than $100, it felt like it was worth it. And one of the reasons I haven't done anything with it in so long is because I was afraid of screwing something up. But I felt like I was ready now, and I noticed as I started to take it apart that these are not the original tuners. You can see there's some extra screw holes there, and the end pin is cracked and all this stuff. But what was really the big concern is this neck joint. And I found out very quickly when I undid that screw that, that screw is what was holding it on. There's no glue in there at all. And the other screw looks like it was put in there for some kind of crack repair. But there's a threaded insert inside that dovetail that is what holds the neck on. And so I thought, well, this makes life easier. I don't have to worry about steaming the neck and breaking anything. I can just pull the neck off and get in there and fix it all up. And I decided very early on that I would try to use the existing thread. But first I wanted to clean this body up. So all those cracks that you see on are just cracks in the finish that they used to use back then. And I like to leave as much of the finish as possible. I don't want to refinish it, but I also want to clean it up and make it look good. And so here I'm wet sanding with a little Windex and some 1,000 grit sandpaper to just sort of clean and smooth that out a little bit before adding a ton of wax to polish it up. And it gives it a little bit more of a matte finish and a gloss finish this way, but I think that looks really nice and appropriate for the guitar. And you can see the body really very quickly started to look very beautiful again, which I had a feeling it would when I saw those pictures all those years ago. Now onto the neck, I very quickly discovered it was just this one screw that I had to really deal with, and I started by hollowing it out and getting rid of that wood so I could add a new piece of wood, a wooden dowel with a ton of glue in there to go across that crack to help give it some support, and also make it look better, of course, and like a sheetrock screw stuffed in there. But so this worked really well, and you can see as I push it in, I'm making sure I'm using a ton of glue. You can see it start to come through those cracks where the crack wasn't healed up perfectly, and so that made me feel real good to know that I was bridging that gap, so to speak, with glue in there. So this all seemed to work pretty well. Getting this wooden dowel in there, it all feels secure. And the other crack that's there, it appears to not be a problem. So while that was drying, I just went in and I started cleaning up the frets. The frets are low and small and skinny, which is kind of typical for these types of instruments, and I decided to keep the original frets, although I'm kind of wondering if I should have refretted it. But I was able to make these frets work and play, and it feels nice, so I just went with what was on there. I'm trying to be as minimally invasive as possible, I suppose, even with the way I electrify it, which is really the idea that I had from the get-go 4 years ago that I'm happy to finally get to. So I'm doing a typical fret job, polishing all the way up to about 2,000 grit, and then using my fingernail buffer to really make those frets shine, and oiling that fingerboard up to get it back to life. And it looks pretty good, as you can see. The neck is not fantastic, and this is where I started also questioning its origins, because the craftsmanship on it did not seem German to me, or at least as high quality as I expected. But it's playable. There's some weird little spots on it, and also, well, we'll talk about the intonation when we get to that. Just used some black water-based stain to kind of hide my work there. Fortunately, it was in a dark spot, and touched up some spots here and there with it, but I didn't get too carried away. I really try to keep it original. But I still wanted to smooth out that heel a little bit where we had all these cracks and holes and stuff. And so I mixed some black tint with some 5-minute epoxy. And instead of sanding the wood down on this already very skinny neck, I sort of filled in the cracks with this black epoxy and then smoothed that all out so it would feel a little better to the hand. And also, this is some kind of weird Bakelite or something veneer on the headstock, which I'm actually not a fan of, but it was original. And so I put it back on. Looked better than nothing and better than me making something for it. I found a screw that will fit this threaded insert, and so I want to keep this bolt-on neck design if I can, because I like bolt-on necks. I mean, that's how I make my original acoustic guitars, but the angle isn't quite right. It's a little low. I need to get a little bit of a cant on it. Normally what I would do is like actually add material here, which I might do, and I think what I'm going to end up doing is a little bit of a combination of adding material here and taking away material here to just get that angle a little bit sharper. And we'll see what happens with just the one screw if I can make it a detachable neck like that, because, you know, why not? I have these scraps of veneer that I just found, a piece of mahogany veneer, and cut a slightly oversized shim to glue onto that spot. And I figured once I glued that on, then I could go and sand the angle into that mahogany that I want and not lose any of the length of the original wood on the neck. And some elastic bands, some tape, a little creative clamping, and I felt like I got a pretty good seam there. Then I shaped it in. So you can see here I'm removing wood from the bottom of it, not the top, to give it that slight angle. And then I fit it to see how it looked on my, just eyeball first guess of what looked like might work. This looked like a good place to start, and I can always go in and adjust it later if I need to. So we know at least the tailpiece was made in Germany. With the neck bolted back on and the original tailpiece and bridge and tuners, I just went and put it back together and put strings on to see what would happen. And I used some flat wounds because it's like I'm going to make a jazz box out of it, and that seemed appropriate. And I also went with some very light flat wounds because, this is a fragile guitar without a accessible truss rod. I don't even know if it's got any steel reinforcement in it. So we just strung it up with these 9s, and I started trying to intonate it. But now let's jump into trying to figure out where this guitar comes from. Let's talk a little bit about who may or may not have made this guitar, because I find it kind of interesting. When I first found it online, I assumed it was a Framus, and I was just going under that assumption, picked it up, and I started searching this Framus database I found online that was really really cool. It shows all the different models that they've made over the years and stuff, and I was seeing all sorts of similarities in the design, but nothing exactly like this. Basically, what I wasn't seeing was a guitar with a cutaway and that third sound hole. It was either one or the other. And also, the cutaways are a little different on the all of the different frames, as I saw, basically giving more access to more of the fingerboard. And also, this whole neck is sort of set deeper in the body, which puts the bridge lower than the F-holes, which also don't match, instead of being lined up in the center of the F-holes like they should be. So there's all these things made me think it's not a frame. So I just started searching for other German Archtop guitars, and the reason I kept searching for German is because it says made in Germany on the trapeze, and also there's a little scrap of paper that you can kind of see inside the F-hole that has some letters, and I saw some double M's and an HOF, and so I was thinking it was probably German words that were on there. And I'm finding other German Archtops, but nothing quite the same until I found this one that was a dead listing from a Reverb site from about years ago, and it was called an Antoria. It was a seller in England, and it's basically identical to this. And so I'm like, okay, well, there it is, Antoria, that must be it. So then I searched that name, and that was apparently like an import name for people that were importing guitars from the Fujigen factory, originally the Gaitone factory in Japan. So this is a Japanese knockoff of a Framus. So it fits right in with this whole series of all these Japanese knockoff guitars I've been working on, the Beetle bass and the Les Paul. So I thought that was really cool. And then upon a little more research into things called Antoria, basically just searching Reverb to see what I could find, I found a couple other listings that had two names. One was a German name and one was Antoria. So I think what might have been happening too by that name is that they had an import business, right? And like I used to have a Wurlitzer upright bass that was made in Czechoslovakia in the same factory as all the Czech basses, but it said Wurlitzer on the inside. And so there might have been some of that going on too. So this may or may not have been made in Germany, but imported via this Japanese import business into England. So basically I know less now than I did when I started searching out, but I think that's all kind of cool. If you know anything about this stuff, leave it in the comments, because I'd love to hear what you've learned. It is interesting how in this day and age with all this information that's out there, we can still have these holes in our knowledge. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the Antoria that I found online, besides being almost identical in looks, has this screw here too, which means that was a factory design, this bolt-on neck back in the 50s or 60s whenever this thing was built. Wicked cool. Okay, so now we have the guitar back together, but still don't know where it's from, and it's time to electrify it. And my plan all along was to make a floating, pickguard with all the electronics in it to be non-invasive. And what I thought I'd do is take advantage of that weird third sound hole. So here I am just jumping on my lathe to sort of make a little scrap of wood that I cut it a slight sort of cone shape, and then I added some padded tape to it that just shoves into that hole and sort of fits in like a cork. And so then I figured I could use that to mount my pickguard. And initially I was going to put the 1/4-inch jack and everything on the pickguard, so it would just be a completely removable electronic unit. But since this end pin hole was kind of janky on this guitar, and I was missing the end pin, I did wire an end pin jack to it. But everything else is just included into this floating pickguard that I designed first in paper. I hand wound a pickup as thin as I could from wood, and then I transferred my paper design to MDF, and then I transferred that MDF to some kind of cool pickguard material I had laying around. Regular viewers of my channel know that nowadays I am a CNC laser guy, so I do almost all of my designing digitally and cutting out my templates and stuff that way. So this was fun for me to go back to the sort of old school way of doing it. And it's been a long time since I really used these skills, and they're not as sharp as they used to be. But that's life. So I use my template to make my pickguard, and then I have this little mini router table I set up that just basically runs this tiny router bit I have with a small round over, and I use that to just make the edge look a little better. Had to fit it in by hand a little bit, and I was pretty pleased with the results. And then I had to figure out how to attach it to my little cork that I made and how to run the wires and stuff. And so I cut a little channel to run the wire, and I used some screws through the pickguard that would be hidden by the pickup to sort of make it all secure. And it's sort of like a working prototype. I'd never done this, and I think it came out pretty good. I just used some two-sided tape to stick the pickup on the pickguard for now. But I thought that wooden top was too bright and didn't match the guitar, so I decided to darken it up with a little bit of this water-based black stain, and you see it just sort of makes it disappear a little bit and not be so out of place. Super easy to wire this, of course, because it was out of the guitar, and I also planned those pots to fit inside the F hole on the guitar, and that way I could get the pickguard down nice and close. Since I added that end pin jack, I was able to run a ground to the bridge by just putting a little piece of bare wire between the ground on the jack and the bridge. So that'll help with noise quite a bit. If I had done my true floating system, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And then I also, even though the pickguard was probably fine the way it was, I thought it'd be a good idea to add this little bit of security here with one of these typical kind of Les Paul style pickguard holders on the edge. This bridge, these are intonatable, but they're really hard to move. You kind of have to take it off to move them. And what I found is that, like, when I had it all sort of set up and intonated at the 12th fret, and I tune it all perfectly, it sounds out of tune. So, it's one of those guitars. So, and so what I've been doing is tuning it to this D chord. And if I tune to the D chord, the guitar seems pretty good. And what it basically means is just the G string is just a little bit flat, and that seems to really get. See? Hear how it sounds a little flat on the C? So maybe we'll split the difference. Sounds a little flat too. Now I think we're good. So the intonation on this instrument is not great, but you can kind of get it in tune, and I'm sure you could mess around with this bridge a little more and maybe that would help. But like I said, it is sort of lining up, or I think the frets are just in the wrong spot. So this is part of a little series of some weird vintage guitars that I've been restoring, some stuff from my collection, that I always kind of wanted to get to. And restoring isn't really the right word. It's more like bringing back to life, because I'm leaving all the cracks in the finish, and I'm not like trying to make this thing look new again. But so the other two instruments that I did, I'm just going to put up for sale on my website at newperspectivesmusic.com. But this one's such an odd duck. I thought it'd be fun to do something different with it, and I put it up on eBay. Just as an auction. The opening bid is what I have invested in it financially, nothing for my time or effort or anything, just my financial commitment to it, and no reserves. So we'll see what happens, because it's kind of a fun guitar. It's a little unique. It's not like, there's some of the intonations a little wonky here and there. It's still got the original frets that are pretty small and low. So it's not like some great player, but it's like a really fun piece. And, it came out of my shop, if that means anything to anybody. The electronics sound good. I think it'll be a nice thing to add to your collection. You might find yourself, noodling around the house with it, or maybe using it on some recordings. I'd be really surprised if everybody wanted to go out and gig with this, but I don't know. Maybe you do. So there's a link in the description, and probably on the screen, for the eBay auction for this guitar. So hurry up and go bid. Bid early, bid often. Thanks for watching, and be good.